Hey, how you doing? This is Adam Post, publisher of more than 1,000 comic books and marketing expert covering Disney desperate to save Pixar, banks on reboots and sequels after losses and layoffs. Let's get into the story. Before we do, please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up. I really appreciate you guys. Coming from Breitbart, desperate to save Pixar, Disney looks to reboots and sequels. And coming from Bloomberg, Disney is banking on sequels to help Pixar get back on track. Pixar used to be a guaranteed moneymaker for Disney. Even before Disney, Pixar was printing money. Anything Pixar did was considered to be an instant classic and a guaranteed moneymaker. But then Disney decided, like the rest of its brands, to use Pixar to push propaganda. And that's when it started all falling apart. From the New York Times, Pixar lays off 175 workers as it returns its focus to films. They're no longer making shows for Disney Plus, their streaming service, and they've laid off a historic number of employees. From Breitbart, desperate to save Pixar, Disney looks to reboots and sequels. Disney's Pixar division is in deep trouble. Flop after flop after flop has plagued this once infallible brand, which leaves Disney and Pixar with only one choice. Since none of their ideas actually work, go back to reboots and sequels, whatever worked before. I don't get the sense that Bob Iger really has good control of any of the managers at Disney. If he fires someone or someone leaves the company, he's got that control, but if they stay at the company, and at least some people have to stay at these companies, how do you get them to do what you know they need to do? All of these new takes that Pixar has been doing, all of the gay Buzz Lightyear movies and things that they're trying to do to reinvent the brands has not worked out for Disney. It looks like they don't know what they're doing because they won't even at least admit to what they're doing. Their excuse for their poor results has been, oh, we made too much content and we got spread a little bit too thin. That's not a legitimate excuse. Making too much content is not why Buzz Lightyear had gay themes in it. It was because they were trying to push an agenda. Same with Elemental. Elemental at Pixar did not need a non-binary major character in it. So what do you do in that case? You cut back on the new material, you go back to sequels and reboots, and then you go and let the creative executives know, hey, look, we're going to be doing a lot with reboots and sequels, so you're going to have to stay on brand. Because if you do a Moana 2, and it doesn't feel like essentially the same kind of thing as Moana 1, we're going to not do well at the box office, which we can't afford to do anymore. So sure, we'll have some new ideas, and it's not like they're only going to do reboots and sequels, but when it comes to their major plans and their major new releases, at least they know a large percentage of them will be what the audience essentially expects, like what they're doing with Deadpool and Wolverine. It doesn't look like a great movie to me. It looks like it's on brand, though, essentially. It looks like them trying to deliver for the Marvel audience what you would expect from a Deadpool and Wolverine Marvel movie. It's not inspired, but at least it's generically on brand. At least with this new strategy, they'll lose less money. And the reporting on this strategy comes from Bloomberg. From Bloomberg, Pixar president Jim Morris's strategy to turn things around involves balancing original movie ideas with sequels and spinoffs, the better to remind audiences what they once loved about Pixar. Every hit of yesteryear is being considered for a reboot, with Finding Nemo and The Incredibles regarded as particularly strong candidates for new titles. Morris aims to make 3 movies every 2 years. Historically, it's been closer to 1 a year, with every other title a sequel or spinoff and the rest standalone concepts or potential seeds for new franchises. The move comes at a pivotal time for Disney's movie studio, which hasn't turned a profit in the division that includes theatrical film releases since April 2022, in part because of the lackluster performances of Lightyear and Elemental. And it's not just Lightyear and Elemental that failed. Lightyear, Elemental, Onward, Soul, Luca, Turning Red, all catastrophes. Granted, the last 4 titles were affected by the pandemic, but lots of movies affected by the pandemic still managed to take hold of the cultural imagination in some way. Those Pixar titles disappeared like last week's episode of Law & Order. And then there's Pixar's focus on pushing the LGBT agenda. Lightyear was a full-blown grooming tool centered on same-sex romance. Elemental had non-binary propaganda. Onward had a lesbian cop. Confronting little kids with adult sexuality is obscene and destroyed Disney's brand probably forever. In another article from Breitbart, they point out 71% of people surveyed want Disney to end the LGBT agenda pushing. Entertainment media that never wants to criticize Disney did their best to blame Pixar's collapse on everything but their obvious propaganda. Meanwhile, Universal made movies for normal people and stole the animation box office crown. Universal does more business at the box office than Disney in animation. That's how bad it's gotten for them. Pixar's next big test will be June's Inside Out 2. The first movie grossed about $850 million worldwide. Despite what entertainment media tell you, after Universal's Super Mario Bros. Grossed $1.5 billion, there's no reason Inside Out 2 can't do the same, if enough people actually like the movie. Pixar had an incredible 15-year run between 1995 and 2010. Toy Story, A Bug's Life, Toy Story 2, Monsters Incorporated, Finding Nemo, The Incredibles, Cars, Up, and Toy Story 3. It was a magical run. But then the complaints about too many male protagonists began, and with it, the creative slippage of forgettable titles like Brave and a spotty box office record. Firing the creative genius behind Pixar, John Lasseter, sure didn't help at all. He was caught up in the Me Too McCarthyism over some unwanted hugs. Sequels are one thing, but does anyone want to see The Incredibles rebooted? Maybe they can't have a traditional kind of family look to them. Maybe they need to come up with something a little bit more LGBT propaganda-oriented. Nemo will likely transition to a shark. If they reboot animated series, if they say, no, The Incredibles are not these people, they are now different people because we don't like their skin color or their genders or their sexual preferences, the children seem too straight or too white or something like that, that won't work. That won't work as a sequel. They tried that with Marvel. It doesn't work. And from Bloomberg, Disney is banking on sequels to help get Pixar back on track. After duds and missteps, the famed animation studio sees Inside Out 2 as key to restoring the magic. Starting with its first full-feature film, Toy Story in 1995, Pixar enjoyed an uninterrupted run for almost 3 decades as a maker of movies that generated billions of dollars at the box office and won countless awards. Such was the threat from Pixar's success to Disney's animation business that in 2006, Disney chief executive Bob Iger finalized a deal with Steve Jobs, then Pixar's majority owner, to buy the company for $7.4 billion. Pixar was also very helpful to resuscitating Disney's failing animation. This was a great deal for Disney, and Pixar didn't even really need to do this deal. They were successful without Disney. But Jobs did agree to sell Pixar to Disney. I wonder what he would think of it now. It proved to be one of the smartest acquisitions in Hollywood history. Pixar franchises, including The Incredibles and Cars, became revenue powerhouses for Disney, driving sales of movie and theme park tickets as well as merchandise. And even as rivals gained on the company, DreamWorks with Shrek, Illumination with Despicable Me, Pixar occupied a unique position in the American imagination. It was renowned as a pioneer of software breakthroughs that made animation feel more lifelike and as a creative force behind films that expertly bridged childhood and adult concerns about family bonds, the pain of grief, and the need to find one's purpose. That held true until 2018, when Pixar suffered a spectacular downturn. John Lasseter, who directed early hits such as A Bug's Life and led much of the studio's success as chief creative officer, was forced to resign under a cloud of sexual misconduct allegations. Then, in the wake of pandemic lockdowns, with people still largely stuck at home, Pixar made 3 original films, Soul, Luca, and Turning Red, available to subscribers on the new Disney Plus streaming service instead of holding them for release in theaters. The decision trained audiences to expect Pixar pictures to premiere on their phones and in their homes instead of in cinemas. I get that excuse. I don't think that excuse is completely without merit. However, the movies weren't good enough. If they were good enough, people would be talking about them. They'd be excited about them. People get excited about TV shows all the time. I just rewatched the Breaking Bad series. I just rewatched Better Call Saul as well. Great writing, great series. We love The Sopranos. We love the original Star Trek. There are a lot of shows that people love and talk about all the time. None of these 3 Pixar movies were good enough or interesting enough to get people talking about them. And that's why they failed. When Pixar finally returned to theaters in 2022 with Lightyear, a Toy Story spinoff, The film's dour tone failed to impress critics and moviegoers, while a scene with a same-sex kiss resulted in its being banned in most countries with predominantly Muslim populations. In June 2023, Pixar's Elemental, a film in which characters embodying fire and water fall in love, opened in cinemas to the worst box office numbers in the company's history. Quote, "We were all kind of gut-punched, and it was tough on morale," says Jim Morris, Pixar's president. Quote, "I thought it was a good film with a Pixar feel, so when it didn't work, that was like, whoa, I was thinking, do people just not want to see the kind of film we make anymore? Is that done? Or are you kidding me, Jim? I mean, I guess you're not allowed to talk about it, but parents don't even trust Disney anymore to show animated films to their children. That's a big problem, and that's going to affect their numbers on this Inside Out sequel. It's going to affect all of Disney's numbers until they win back parents' trust, which they look like they're in no rush to do. The phase that Disney seems to be at right now is try to produce things that look like what you think they should be and dial back on the propaganda. Keep it on brand. That should produce some moderate success, no massive breakout winners, no record-breaking numbers, but at least they'll stop losing so much money and embarrassing themselves. And they'll get their creative executives more focused on what they should be focused on, which is trying to make things that people actually have demonstrated that they want to see, rather than what they want people to see to try to persuade them into some progressive propaganda agenda. If families show up for Inside Out 2 in the kinds of numbers Pixar used to see, it will reaffirm the studio's standing. But if the movie fails, it will fuel concerns about the company's relevance in an increasingly crowded animation industry and call into question whether its next films, Elio in 2025 and Toy Story 5 in 2026, are just more bets in the wrong direction. Fittingly, Pixar is introducing a new personified emotion in Inside Out 2, anxiety. But with a sequel, if you put something out there that doesn't have the goods, then you'll be punished for it, Morris says. Having had the doldrums we did, it certainly will be a good test with Inside Out 2 for us to see. Does this stuff still work or does it not? Over the years, Pixar's films have grossed more than $15 billion at the box office and won 23 Oscars, 11 Golden Globes, and 11 Grammys. Ed Catmull, who served as president of both Pixar and Disney's animation business for more than a decade following the acquisition, outlined the steps to make a great Pixar movie in his 2014 book, Creativity Incorporated, Overcoming the Unseen Forces That Stand in the Way of True Inspiration. I would suggest checking this book out. I've not seen this book yet, I've not read it, but I'm going to look into it. In the early years, Pixar really was great. And greatness is a process. It's not just inspiration. It's inspiration plus a disciplined process. You can learn a lot from process books, especially from people who've accomplished great things. From the book, first hire great people because great people will come up with great ideas. One such idea was an animation program called Visit, which Pixar developed for Monsters, Inc. to bring Sully to life. The software determined how the 3 million individual strands of hair in his speckled blue fur moved in the wind or rain. Great employees were why Pixar rarely had to source a script from anyone who wasn't already a colleague, and why directors of its later films had typically climbed the ranks working on earlier ones. Pixar was always so focused on story. Everyone who worked at Pixar really understood that character had to have a great story, and we had to see and understand that story. It was not about agenda. The only agenda was a great, compelling, relatable story. Second, Catmull wrote, "Be candid, because candor produces great results. Pixar has a team of directors it calls the Brain Trust, which has no editing control over a fellow director's movie, but provides feedback on first cuts. The Brain Trust hated the character of Woody, voiced by Tom Hanks, in the first iterations of Toy Story, because he was a jerk. It took dozens of alterations to transform him into one of Pixar's most treasured protagonists. Third, embrace failure, because failure is a learning opportunity that leads to better ideas. Pixar has shut down several projects it was developing," Catmull wrote, without specifying which ones, because the films didn't meet the company's standards. We don't know how these sequels and reboots are going to actually do for Pixar. We do know that Disney has realized it can't just keep putting out Pixar films that lose tons of money. It affects investors, it affects morale, they aren't building any brands. So yes, they may as well go back to focusing on anything that did well in the past, like Moana, and do a sequel on it. If they put additional propaganda into Moana, there'll be an extra character here, a supporting character there, but it doesn't look like they're going to race swap Moana or try to change Moana into something where if you saw the first one and then you saw the second one, you would say, wow, look at all these things they changed. This is ridiculous. Stop it with the agenda already. If they don't do it, Pixar's not going to be able to continue on its own. They'll have to merge it into something else to justify the costs. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another story. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.